Let me know when you're ready. Okay. Good evening, everybody. We are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Daisy Davis. I am the board president, and I want to welcome you to tonight's presentation. This is an important process that we are embarking on at Elkhart Community Schools. The results of this feasibility and demographic study will possibly make some changes in the district. So we are inviting you to stay engaged. I'm happy that you're here. But what's most important to the administration and the board is that we are making decisions that you support. We are moving in the direction that the community can stand behind us, but we're also making decisions that are best for the kids. So I want to thank you for coming. I want to continue to encourage you to come to all the meetings. We need your voice and your help and your support to make these decisions because we want to do what's best for our students, and so we can continue to make Elkhart Community Schools the best school district in the area. So tonight we're going to hear from School IQ. They are the ones that are heading up these efforts. They are the ones that's going to be engaging the community. They are the ones that's gathering the information. So they want to educate you about what this process looks like, how you can be involved, and how the decision-making process will work. So I, again, want to welcome you and thank you for coming, and I want to turn it over to School IQ.
Thank you very much, Daisy. And ladies and gentlemen, my name is Del Jarman, and I'm I guess the director, if you want to call it that, or coordinator of this process, feasibility process. And first, I want to welcome you here. Thank you for coming out. And before we get too far along, I'd like to have a couple of my colleagues come up, and so you get a chance to hear a little bit about them. And I'll save a couple of comments on my background before we get into the presentation. So would you like to come on up for us here, please, kiddo?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paula O'Loughlin, and I am one of the team members who will be supporting the work being done in your schools. Just a little bit about myself and my background. I started out as a teacher many years ago and moved into student programming and curriculum and development, and then also had the privilege of serving on my school board in my hometown in Minnesota. Also spent a couple years working at the Minnesota School Boards Association, supporting school boards across the state in their governance role and really working with them to increase their efficacy and their capacity to govern the most effectively, to serve their students. And just wanted to share that, one of my favorite quotes, and it was something that I always tried to keep at the fore when I was in the classroom and in really all my work, and that is a phrase, nothing about us without us, that some of you might have be familiar with. And I think that is so pivotal and so crucial, and to build upon President Davis's remarks, that your voice and your input and your perspective is going to be essential to being able to provide options for the board to consider to make sure that Elkhart Community Schools is doing its very best to serve each and every student, staff member, parent, guardian, everybody in the community. And so thank you so much for being here and for learning more about the process. And like President Davis said, I hope that you'll stay engaged and share your voice. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Todd Garrison, and I'm a business developer with SiteLogic, but I'm a 31-year educator and recently retired in education here in Indiana after 30 years as a teacher, as a coach, as a dean, as an assistant principal, and then finishing 8 years as a principal. And I mention those things to you because the process that you are going through, I have been through myself, through my own school and my own corporations. And as an educator, what I'm going to do first is assign you homework. So the first thing you do, you sit down, you get homework, right? But we would love to see the next time that we are here, this auditorium half full, because truly we need your input into what happens with Elkhart schools, some of the decisions that are made. This feasibility study is about community support and community engagement. And we hope that you can share that message with people that, we all have the same mission, and that's an improvement through Elkhart schools. And I look forward to working with you and being on this team, and hopefully that through our community and collaborative efforts, we'll be back here celebrating. So look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, folks. A little bit about my background. I've been in education all my life, I guess. I'm 76 years old, and I'm still at it, and I love it. It's just who I am, I suppose. But I was a classroom teacher. I started out as a classroom teacher. I taught English, if you will, and I also taught the field of psychology because I double majored in the undergraduate level, which means I couldn't make up my mind. At the same time, I went on and later on became a school counselor and then director of guidance services for a school district. That brought me more into understanding of what the bigger picture looked like. And so I turned to what teachers call the dark side and went into into the administrative realm, if you will. And I worked as a director of curriculum, and I was an athletic director and a head football coach and assistant basketball coach. I also drove buses, and I sold popcorn in between that time, and finally moved into the role of a superintendent of schools. And after a rather good lengthy time as a superintendent, I moved into higher education. I last finished as a professor at Ball State University for almost 10 years. I was the chairman of the leadership department at Kennesaw State University, which is just outside of Atlanta. I was at the Citadel, former military, so I was at the Citadel, which is a military college of South Carolina as well. And all that's to say is I couldn't hold a job. The bottom line to all this, though, is that I love what I do. And I really enjoy working with communities and with school boards. And it's all about children. If we're not here about children, then we're not here for the right reason. And I think that, first of all, I need to share with you that I am so pleased to work with this school board and this administration and this community. Not a lot of school boards will take that on to engage their community as much as this school board wants to engage you in the process. And I commend them. That's all outstanding. If I had the way that I believe every school and school district in the United States ought to be doing something very similar to this, to put teachers, community members, school district people, children, and all of them together to do what's best for the district and the children of that district in the long term. So I'm going to go through and tell you a little bit about who we are, number one, first. Then I'm going to tell you about the process that we use, and then we'll kind of wrap it up at the end with question and answers that you may have out there, and feel free to please be sure that you put those questions in front of us so we can talk to you about that. We won't have all the answers tonight, but hopefully we can give you the best we can at this point. So here we go. We'll talk about a little bit about who we are. We are a combination, folks, of both School IQ and SiteLogic. SiteLogic is the parent company, by the way. It is a really large company, by the way. It's licensed in all 50 states, and there are 32 regional offices across the country. We have basically 5 divisions, but the division that we work out of here is in the Midwest division, and our entire body of work is with K-12 education, okay? We represent, in School IQ, we represent the educational portion, if you will, and the community engagement portion of SiteLogic. SiteLogic, though, has its background in working in school facilities, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. So there you know a little bit more about us as a nationwide presence of K-12. Here in the Midwest, as I mentioned, we are currently in the Midwest. We have these 8 states that you see. We have over 100 K-12 school clients at this point. In the last 4 years, we've worked with $1.7 billion in project history and $230 million of construction that we do with school districts. SiteLogic does with school districts annually. So it's a rather large group of people. Okay, so The school IQ site logic, we focus on building strong relationships with the partnerships, by the way. You can take a quick look there, and I'll go on to the next slide. The school IQ is comprised of thought leaders. That's who we are. We're all educators, by the way. And we have years of experience, by the way, that helps us, I think, to work with school boards, school faculty members, and the community as well. The things that what School IQ does, we do school board workshops, we do strategic planning with school districts, we do leadership development, we do executive coaching, cohort leadership, and the one that we're going to talk about the most this evening here, of course, is the educational feasibility process. And I would tell you that, folks, this whole thing about public education is changing dramatically, and we'll give you a little bit of history to help you with that. So here's what the numbers have told us. Being a school superintendent, being a school administrator, even the principals today have a very difficult time. The average length of a school superintendent's stay is now 2.3 years, and it used to be 6 years prior to 2019. And here's what we see now. The average number of superintendent openings in 2019 was 16%. Since 2019, it's gone to 29%. And now, post-2021, the average number of superintendent openings is 41%. That's a real difficult position to be in. Anybody that's held that, and I've held that for a number of years, that's a very difficult position because you become the face of that district, and everybody has a different idea of what's good for children, okay? So that's a tough job. Now let's talk about being a school board member. The average length of the individual school board service member prior to 2019, members served an average of 7.4 years on the school board. But trending post-2021, it's down to 4.3 years. Here's another very interesting statistic for you. The average number of board members resigning before completing their term before 2019 was 5%. And people resign for various reasons. They move or there's an illness or whatever. But trending post-2021, the number resigning early is 16%. So what I'm trying to share with you is that it's so easy to blame school board members. It's so easy to blame the superintendent or the staff. They don't listen to us. Well, our goal is to help everybody listen to everybody. So let's talk about this feasibility process, because we want to combine the best of education with the best of its community. And the thing that our team will do first, and what we've already started to do, the board was kind enough to give us this opportunity a month and a half, 2 months ago. And so we've already started in pre-work to learn as much about the district as we can. And you'll see in our process that I'll explain to you for a few moments that we work from learning the broad picture of the district, and we drill down to find out more about the specific things that's driving the issues in the district. The number one goal of our feasibility process is to identify and fully understand the needs of that district, which in this case is Elkhart Community Schools. And folks, we help the community and the community helps us, and then we present that to the board, different options that may or may not be workable and feasible for the district. The whole idea behind a feasibility study is think about the word feasible. What is feasible? For us, as we work together with the community, there are 3 things that drive whether something is feasible. First, the options that we develop have to be educationally sound. It's all about children. It's about teachers teaching better and children learning, if you will, better. So if it's not an educationally sound option, we don't want to consider it, number one. Second of all, whatever options are developed, they have to be fiscally affordable by the district. Otherwise, that's a waste of time. And third, and in our opinion, the most important part of that is it has to be community supported. Okay? I'm going to give you a personal little story real quick. I've been a superintendent in 4 districts. As my wife would say to me, you can't hold a job. Well, anyway, bottom line is this. Everywhere I went, and I didn't plan for that in my career, but there were school districts going through change. Okay? Most school districts in the United States today are either growing or they're declining. If you're close to a major hub like Indianapolis, most of those districts are growing. If you are more rural in nature, or in some cases like Elkhart, your enrollment is declining. And that creates real different and difficult hardship questions for the board and its community and for its administration. Well, so one of the last districts that I was a superintendent at was here in Indiana. And I remember on the very first day that I walked into that role and put my boxes down around the room in the superintendent's office. And within a few hours, as I was trying to unpack and kind of get settled, I had a committee of 7 people who came to my office and said, "Hey, Doc, will you give us a few moments to sit and talk with you?" And I said, "Absolutely, please pull up a chair, let's do that." So I put down what I was doing, and we sat down and we talked. Now, I'll share with you real quick a little background. That school district had had 5 superintendents in 12 years. I was the 5th superintendent in that 12-year period, okay? I will also share that in its 26-year history prior to my arrival, not a single superintendent had ever retired as a superintendent from that district. No one had ever stayed long enough. Now, that's not a very good picture to have, okay? What was the biggest challenge of that, and what had created all those issues between the community, the board, the superintendent, so on and so forth? Bottom line is that district prior to my arrival had been 5,500 students. When I arrived, we were down to about 3,000. And previously, as buildings sizes began to dwindle, boards and superintendents had talk about, we can't keep buildings open that are only half full. We can't afford to do that. And so guess what? Of course, the question became is, what do we do? How do we move children around? Families are going to be upset, so on and so forth. So the last 2 superintendents, by the way, had been let go because they couldn't get the communities to work together. So I was listening in the first 30 minutes of these 7 individuals told me, "Doc, here's what should be done here." And then they proceeded to tell me that one middle school should be built right in the middle next to the high school, and that's the best way to handle this. So after each of these people had spoken to me and told me what should be done, by the way, one of those had run for the governorship of Indiana and almost won. Large major farming group, okay? And when I got done, or they got done with that 30 minutes, folks, they turned to me and said, "Okay, man, you're the expert here. You have this degree and all that. So what do you think we should do?" And ladies and gentlemen, I said to them, and this is so true, I said, "It doesn't make any difference what I think." And the one gentleman who ran for the governorship said, "What do you mean it doesn't make any difference? You're the expert." I said, "No, sir. It makes no difference what I think. What does make a difference is you've gone through 5 superintendents. I'm the 5th one in 12 years. No one seems to have an answer of where we should go best, but I know this, that community out there that you have." And then I pointed out that most areas don't have one community. They have multiple communities. I said, we got to find ways to where we can get these people to work together. And so what's going to be important is that the board listens to the communities, the combined voice of the communities, because the children are suffering for what's going on. And you're losing money as children leave and families leave the area. And pretty soon you won't have enough money to continue to do the work you need to do for the children who are still here in the families. And so that's the approach that we took. And what we do here, folks, is that same approach. The board graciously has said we need to listen more. Okay? So let's talk about the process. First of all, I will tell you that there's a distinct difference between what a feasibility study is and what a facilities study is. Most school districts will have facility study, and here's what that is. The facility study refers to the current condition and the anticipated infrastructure and maintenance needs of the district school buildings. They come in and look at your buildings. By the way, we're going to do that here too, all right? And I'll talk a few moments about how that's going to work and be so that you understand what we mean by that. Second is, though, that the feasibility process encompasses both an educational look at the district as well as that facilities look, okay? We have 5 elements that we present to the school board. Now, in some cases in districts we worked with, they say, hey, we only want you to do 3, or we want you to do 4 or 2. Elkhart listened to what we do and how we do it and the experience we've had and said, we want all 5 of those, okay? So let me tell you about what those 5 elements are. The first one, which we consider to be extremely important, by the way, is education. First of all, you'll learn about our team that we never assume anything. We will ask members of this community over and over, What does that mean? Explain that. We want to get a better sense of that. Again, we get these broad ideas of what we're hearing and reading, and then we start to drill down. So we never assume anything. We always want you to clarify for us. The team that you have together here has over 300 years of educational experience. We've all been in the classroom. We've all been in some type of administrative or school board role. So we're certainly not new to what's going on. We've all been here before. We've all seen these before, by the way, in other districts. All right, well, we believe in School IQ that form follows function. And we focus on the educational, the curricular, and the facilities of the district. And you could see up there on the thing, some of the things that we've done with different school districts. We looked at class size and school redistricting and grade configurations. We've checked and looked at school education, special education, curriculum mapping, and vertical articulation of math and language arts, and so on and so forth. So we've looked at many, many areas. I will tell you this. The areas that we're looking at here and the areas we look at with every school district are self-identified by the school. The district knows the problems. They're looking for help and answers and solutions. So what we're going to show you at the end here is the areas that we've listened back to. I'll explain how we found out the areas that we proposed to the board and how that process works and what we hope to accomplish and look at here in Elkhart. But that's what we do right there. Okay, second of all, there's the demographics portion. This is very critical for a school district. The reality is that we only work with people who are nationally recognized. You have working here with Elkhart Schools and this board one of the finest nationally recognized demographics experts that we have. This lady is Hazel Reinhardt. She is out of Minnesota, by the way, and she's also worked with the New York City schools. So you don't get any bigger than that, all right? So she really has a very good handle of what she does when it looks at school demographics. And here's what demographics are. Demographics is where we look back at the history of the district. We say, how many students were in that school district 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, so on and so forth. And they look at those historical averages, and then they start looking at trends. Demographics is also a trend-looking process. And so Hazel is looking at the trends. Guess what? You've lost 1,000 students here in the last 5 years. Think about that. Now, what does 1,000 students represent? If we want to get practical, okay, practical, each student represents about $6,500 we get from the state of Indiana for Elkhart schools. Now think about what 1,000 students means. Think about the revenue loss that's coming to this school district, which puts more pressure on the board, more pressure on this superintendent. How do we keep things going? How do we keep making sure that kids that are here get the best education they can have? These are real world problems, okay? Well, demographics will not only look at the last 10 years or so, Hazel then starts to project what's it going to look like over the next 5 to 10 years. Because without that knowledge and without that idea of what this district is going to look like 5 and 10 years out more, how does a school board make the best decision? Okay? And how does the superintendent and his staff work with those decisions? So demographics is a very critical part, and you've got a dandy doing that here. The next area we're going to talk about is budget. We have one of our team members who's a retired chief financial officer for a school district. And Mr. Bowman was not able to be here tonight. He has COVID. Bless his heart. It's the second time he's had COVID. I said, you liked it so much you wanted it twice? And his comment, of course, is, oh, darn it, that's not as bad as it was the first time. Thank the Lord for that. But he couldn't be here with us this evening, or he would be telling you about his work, okay? But let me share with you a comment about his work. You see, many school districts will either have to change things in the buildings, they'll have to add a building if they're growing, or they'll have to do some consolidation somewhere if they're declining or whatever. And the reality is, everybody says, how much is that going to cost me in my taxes? You do new buildings or you do something to buildings, that's going to cost me more money. That's true. Sometimes it doesn't cost you any more money at all because it's what we call tax neutral. And believe me, this board is serious about trying to be tax neutral, okay? They don't want to be in your pocket. any more than you want them to be in your pocket. I promise you that. So the reality is this. While people talk about how it will affect them in the way of their facilities, guess what no one ever talks about? Well, when you change the size of a building, it also changes many times the number of people working in that building. So do you need more custodians if you're going to have a bigger building? Do you need fewer teachers if you're going to have a smaller building? Or if you're going to add people from one building to another and we got to add staff to that building, what does that do in the way of nurses and support staff, counselors? So one of the things that separates us from anybody else in the country doing this is we not only tell you about how it might affect your facilities budget, we'll tell you how it's going to affect your educational budget. And that's an important part of what we do. Okay, let's go on to the facilities portion. That's what Todd's area is about. He works for the Site Logic side, which is the facilities side. By the way, we have had somewhere between 17 and 20 facilities experts. Now, what is a facilities expert? Well, they're engineers, and they're architects, and they're facility analysts, and they're construction managers. We've had 17 to 20 of our staff from Site Logic in here, and they've already been in all your buildings, every one of them. Your transportation center, your central office building, they've been everywhere. And they've been trying to get a good handle on what level of 100% efficiency and capacity is that building working at right now. Here's what that means. Every one of your school buildings has a chiller, a boiler, air handlers, the things that make your building work for the good of teaching and learning, okay? Well, what we do is that when a manufacturer builds a piece of equipment, he sells it, it's put into a school building. But guess what most school buildings don't do, or school districts don't do? They don't know when that asset was put in. They don't know how many years old it is. So our group is going in and they're cataloging every asset in every building that you have that was put in here. And then the manufacturer also specifies how many years of useful life that asset has. So they might put in an air handler and say that air handler will last for 25 years. We manufactured it, we built it, and that's what we know is the average lifespan of that air handler is 25 years. And so when we catalog how old that piece of equipment is in that building, we'll also say how many years it's got left on its expected life. Now, that doesn't mean a 25-year piece of equipment might not last 27 years. It may be on its 27th year and still going. But guess what you don't know? You know now when we get done with what we do, or Site Logic gets done with what it does, you're going to know you're on borrowed time. Okay? The other thing we'll do is to say, well, even though that asset's maybe 2 years older than it should be, is it still running at 100% efficiency? Does that air handler work like it's supposed to work? Because if it doesn't, that's costing you energy. We'll also be doing that as well. So our team from Site Logic has been in here doing that, and they have already picked up all the information out of your buildings, and now they're starting to catalog and compare it back to what the manufacturer specifications are. They will be presenting their findings on those buildings to the school board, to the community, to the administration, and the individual buildings as well, okay? And that's another thing that we'll do. And finally, we come to the fifth part, the community part, the most important part that we believe that's so important and critical to the success of this effort. You see, we have already recommended to the school board that we want the board to name a committee, key committee of this community of between 35 and 45 members. And we found that a district this size, if you put less than 35 people in here for a district the size of Elkhart, you're going to have some folks that said, I wasn't represented there. And if you get too much larger than 45, you're going to have people say, well, it gets so big you can't work with it. And that's true. It gets to be too unwieldy if it gets too large, okay? Now, when we sit down with Daisy and her staff at the board, we made some recommendations, not of individual people, because we don't know people here, folks. But we recommended the types of people that might want to be on that committee. And I'll share that with you if you don't mind. so that you know what we recommended. So we've said, well, now we're not saying everybody should be exactly these people, but they should represent that group, okay? So the mayor and the city and county council should be on there, law enforcement, fire department representation, hospital administration, chamber of commerce and business community, manufacturing should be on there. We should have a wellness committee and community engagement people here. We should have the economic development people on board there. We should have the farm community, Farm Bureau of Indiana representatives. We should have clergy on there. We think the board attorney should be on there. We think senior citizens should be represented. We think the school administration, but we don't let the superintendent come there. He's one of those guys that sits off to the side. We keep him kind of out there by himself over there so he can kind of see the whole process. We also think that there should be faculty on here and school administration, as I said, and we also should have non-certificated. So we want the bus drivers to be represented and the school cooks and the custodians. So we won't have all of them on there, of course, but we think there should be parents on there, and mostly we want to have grandparents who no longer have children in the school because they still pay taxes. All right? And then there could be others that the board may want to have, but those are the types of people that we want on this committee. Now, I want to share one other thing that's interesting to you. Elkhart County is approximately, and please don't hold me to the exact number, but approximately 70% white, 30% African American, Latino, and other population. Okay? Elkhart Community Schools, though, is 38% white, 62% African American, Latino, and other population. Okay? So what we asked the school board to do is this. I said to them, and I am desperately asking them to do this and asking you to help us do this. If this community group doesn't represent all of those groups in somewhat equal fashion, so we've recommended about 50-50, okay? About 50-50 African American, Latino, and other population, and 50% Anglo-White Saxon. And we said if it doesn't represent that, this process could fail, and none of us want that. Folks, I'm here to tell you, and this is a wooden thing, so I'm going to beat on that. We haven't had a failure yet in any of the districts we've done. The one that you'll be most familiar with is LaPorte Community Schools. We did this in 2015 and 16 with them, and it was very successful. We know the process. We believe in the process. So I'll share that with you right now. We have all the confidence in the world. But the makeup of this community group is important. And guess what? We can't have, if it's a manufacturing person, we can't have somebody that's only the head of manufacturing. We also need workers because they pay taxes there. So we need a mixture of skilled workers in this group. We need a mixture of Latinos in this group. And one of the members today that we spoke to, because we talked to the administrative team this morning, and two of them are Latino. And one of them said to me, "Hey, Del, guess what? There's more than just one sect of Latinos, okay? We're not all from this place or that place or whatever." And I said, good point. So for us, the board will finalize the list, but we need people's names to be submitted to the board and to the superintendent of schools. We're going to ask faculty members, please submit names of your families that you know were good people that would do this for us. Submit those to your principal. Submit those up the line to the superintendent to the board. So we need that broad perspective. Now, I've asked the board, and it's a little ambitious, and I admit that, and I said that last night to the board, bless their hearts. I asked them if there's a chance we could have that group named by October 4th. I'd like to come back and meet with them. Our team would like to come back and meet with them, okay, because we won't know any of them. But the one thing that we want to share with that group after we've had each of us introduce ourselves and we tell them about who we are and what we do and why this is so important, then we're going to encourage, some of them are going to be in that group and they're not used to speaking up. They're not used to being asked their opinion. And we want to make sure that that committee knows that every voice is going to be heard. We're going to value and dignify every voice in that committee. So we got to talk about that and make them feel comfortable to talk. Because you know what? If we work as separate individual groups, instead of as one group together, this community coming together, this will fail. And we've never had one fail. So we need that. Okay? We really need that. So that's what our effort is. Now, I will tell you this about the Key Community Committee. It literally changes roles 4 times during the process. And I'll tell you how it works. But before I do that, let me share with you, we asked the members of the board individually, it was not done collectively, we asked them to individually think of the most challenging, pressing needs of Elkhart schools. And they each sent me that list of what they saw. Hey, this is the pressing need we have. Then we've asked Superintendent Thalheimer to do the same thing with his staff. And guess what we started to do? We cross-referenced those and we said, what are the things that keep coming up over and over again, no matter who it was? Okay? So let me share with you what we have said back to the board that we would like permission to study, because this starts the whole process. Okay, so we're awaiting the approval of the board, and Daisy and the board have received this already. They've already looked at it, and they've had an opportunity to ask questions about that, and we're just waiting to see where we go from here and get their approval. We hope that we get that approval, but here we are. These are the themes that we have learned. There's 9 major themes. One is loss of students, families, and staff here in the district. That's a major theme. 2, public relations and the way this community perceives Elkhart schools. 3, we have some academic challenges. By the way, don't think that Elkhart's the only one that has academic challenges. Carmel has academic challenges, and they've got kids from some of the wealthiest families in the state, right? But folks, they've got academic challenges too. There hasn't been a school district we've ever worked with that doesn't have academic challenges. So does Elkhart. So we're going to focus a lot of our efforts here on math and English language arts performance. The next thing is instructional practices and the speed of curriculum implementation. If you listen to faculty, which I've listened to faculty all my life, because I was faculty, I even listened to faculty as a faculty member, right? Teachers will always say, daggone, we're doing so much and we don't have enough time to do it. There is some degree of truth, right? There's never enough time for kids. But guess what? We've got to be smart about what we do. And also, we want to listen to those voices, but we also want to say, okay, what can we do and how can we do it better? The superintendent's absolutely open to those conversations. The board's open to all of those conversations. So we want to hear those same conversations for ourselves. The next area is school safety, security, and discipline. That's a big one, right? You're not alone. You're not alone. I lived in Noblesville, Indiana, a suburb of Indianapolis. Guess what? The first school shooting occurred in Noblesville at a middle school. Who would have thought that? Okay? So having disciplined discussions in areas to think about, folks, it's normal, it's natural, it's unfortunate, but it is so true. So we're going to have some discussions with the community about that. Then we're going to talk about school facilities and funding. Absolutely, you have to, because the board has a job to do. And that job is to make sure that what funds are available are spent wisely on the children that are here and the families that are here. So we have to have some tough conversations because that's their role, that's their responsibility. That's the superintendent's responsibility and his staff. We've got to keep this district financially sound for the children who are here. The next is the trust and faith in district leadership. It is so easy to poke fingers at somebody else. Okay? So we've got to have those conversations. We've got to have conversations about the collaboration and the communication between the board, the superintendent, the staff, the leadership team, so that we talk together as one group. That's how we'll make improvement. And finally, we have to talk about developing and improving community connections between the school district and the school communities. Okay? Those are the 9 major areas that we hope the board gives us approval on. By the way, were those the only things that were mentioned? Oh, heavens no. Good Lord, we had probably 100 different things, like my bus driver doesn't arrive at the right time in the morning and it's difficult. I don't know if I'm having school today or not. Of course that. But folks, these are the ones that keep coming up over and over again. So there isn't enough time and money for us to study 100, 200 different areas of things that we need to talk about. But these are the ones that are most important to the board and to the community at this point. So that's the proposed areas we want to study. Finally, we'll talk about, okay, how does this roll out? What's this all about? So once the board gives us permission to move forward, adopts those areas or makes changes if we need to make changes, once we get permission to move forward, the first thing that we do is, as a team of educators, we put together a list of, I'm going to call them questionnaires, but they're not really questionnaires, they're more statements. And they're statements that we ask people to respond to that statement. And we put it on what's called a Likert scale, and it goes from I strongly disagree with that statement I'm reading, all the way up through to I strongly agree with that statement. Guess what we don't do? We don't allow anybody to say I have no opinion. So we're going to put together a series of questionnaires, if you will, on these 9 themes. From our professional experience and working with the school districts across the country, we think we know what to say about those. But then we're going to send them back to the district because we need the district to say, oops, you missed one, Del. You need to add this one, or that's a good list, or we want you to change the wording of that statement to this because we think our district would be better off that. So we're going to get their approval to proceed on those, and once we have that approval, we bring them back and we finalize those questionnaires, if you will, and then we send them back to the district and we ask the district, make sure that everybody in this district gets a chance to look at them and respond to them. Now, some of the questionnaires we have, folks, by the way, we're not going to survey elementary children, but we are going to survey your middle school children and your high school children. Okay? We have great response from kids. So some of the questions we're going to ask are kids' questions only. How safe do you feel? What's the time of the area or the day that you're most concerned about? Do we have enough lighting, by the way, in the evening time when people are walking around in the buildings and they've got academic things or athletic things going on after school? Is that a safe time for you? So we're going to have some things that go just to kids. We'll have some of those same questions go back to adults as well, okay? But we'll have some things that are only going to go to teachers, because they're academic in nature, and we need to know about the speed of curriculum implementation. And guess who knows that best? Teachers know that best. So some of the questions will be just for them, but there'll be a whole number of things that go out to all the community. So once we have permission, those are done, we send them to Superintendent Thalheimer, and then those go out across the district. Now, here's the other thing we recommend. We recommend only a 2-week period of time for those to be returned. By the way, they're not returned because they're done electronically. And they're also going to be done paper ballot-wise, I think, because Steve and the board and his staff are going to say, well, what about people that don't have the ability to do it electronically? How do we get their input? I trust this board, I trust this administration. They're going to find the best answers to get all those out to folks as they can, okay? We want to hear from as many as we possibly can. Now, what happens once we get the results? Well, then we have to have a little time by ourselves to go through and get the results. And what happens is, once they come back to us, it'll take us probably a month. Our team will take about a month. And what we do is we then take a look at all of those numerical responses and we look at trends. Just like the demographer looks at the trends over the past 10 years of the enrollment, we look at trends of responses. Once we have the trends identified, we'll share that with the community. We'll share it with the superintendent, his staff. We'll share it with the board. But once we have trends identified, then our team goes back to work and we start putting in specific questions. And somewhere, we'd probably be ready to come back here with a whole team of educators, somewhere probably by Christmas. But guess what? Nobody wants to see us at Christmas. You don't want to see us at Christmas. Your children don't want to see us at Christmas. So we'll probably be here right after the first of the year. Okay? And then I'll bring our whole team in here, and we think we'll be here for 2 weeks. I have made a promise to this board that our team would be in every school building. We will talk with every faculty member, unless they're sick or ill the day we're there. We'll talk with bus drivers. We're going to talk with cooks. We're going to talk with custodians. We're going to talk with nursing staff and with teacher aides. We want to talk to the whole community. Now, at the same time that's going on, we'll talk about a lot of the educational things there, and the non-educational things, like the bus drivers will say, hey, what's your biggest challenge? We want to know those things. But then we'll spend all day in the buildings for probably up to 2 weeks. When that bell rings and kids go to class, we're going to class. And we're going to be there till the bell rings again, then at the end of the day, it lets us out. And then we're going to go back to the hotel or whatever we're at, and we're going to crash for a few hours, maybe get something to eat, and guess what? Somewhere at the time around, whatever the superintendent and the board tells us, 6:30, whatever, we're going to come back and we're going to start meeting with community groups. We call those focus groups. And we're going to say, if you've ever seen TV where it says, survey says, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to meet with groups of people, and it's like, if you would like to be on a particular group, and we'll have those ready to talk to you about later on, but if you want to be on a particular group because that's a very major interest of yours, by all means, you need to let the district know. And then we'll have these community groups, and we'll meet in the evening. We'll normally go about 1 hour for each group meeting. And we'll do multiples of those in the evening time. So for us, those days we're here probably, we work about 14-hour days there. Now, I'm too old to work much past 14 hours. And I can't do it much beyond 2 or 3 weeks. I just can't do it. But I'll tell you, those are going to be an intense 2 weeks of time. And we're going to have a ball doing it. We're going to learn a lot. And we're going to say to every group, survey says, what does that mean? Tell us what that means, and we're going to listen to people talk and get down deep. That's where we go from the broad to the specific. By the way, we're also going to be in the buildings talking to kids. We're going to ask the kids the same thing. Here's what we learned when you did those surveys. What does that mean? And after those period of times are completed, we got to go crash for another month or so, and we got to start looking at all the information we have. Now, at the same time that we're doing that, SiteLogic has already been in all the buildings, and they're starting to catalog all the information on the buildings. And so they're going to come and talk to the community group, and they're going to talk to the board, and they're going to talk to the principals, administration. They're going to say, here's what we learned about your building. Here's what we learned about your buildings. This building has some real problems. Okay, and at some point in time, SiteLogic will have discussion with the board about, okay, how do we fix those, or do we want to fix that building? Okay, so when we share all of this information back with the community group, we'll be with the community group multiple times early. First, to get them started, know who we are, what we're doing, the process. Next, we'll come back and we'll share with them the results of the surveys that were done. And we'll also tell them where we're going next. Next, we come back and say, guess what? We've been in the buildings and we've been in the community meetings, and here's what we've learned. We'll share that with them. At that point in time, we'll sit down with our architects, our engineers, our construction managers. With the board's permission, we'll start to say, what are some options? How much will they cost? Some options won't be a thing because they're educational in nature. Some options are going to be about the buildings themselves. And guess what? We'll put together options from a standpoint where, because, see, we don't have any politics with us. okay? We're not from here. So we can look at things objectively, if you will, because they don't affect us, we don't live here. That's not really good, is it? But in some cases it is, because it allows us to be objective. And what we'll do is we'll put together some options. We never call them recommendations. They're not recommendations, they're options. And we'll tell the committee, here's some options for you. And then we'll start looking at all those options, and we'll put papers up, and they'll have a T-square, and it'll be on one side of that T at the top is the pros, and on the opposite side will be cons. And we'll say to the committee, tell us what's good and what's bad. And believe me, they'll do it. They always do. And when we're done with presenting all the options that we've come up with, then we turn to the committee and say, okay, now you give us your options. And sometimes the committee will take certain things we've done in one option and pair it with something they've done of a different option, and they'll come up with a brand new option that isn't anything like what we've looked at. And that's happened before. We did one at MSD of Mount Vernon, or Mount Vernon Community Schools in Fortville, Indiana, which is a suburb of Indianapolis. And they come up with their own option. I thought that was brilliant, and we encourage it all the time. But that's the way that process works. Then guess what happens at the very end, folks? At the very end, we may have 10 options, we may have 15. We never know how many options we're going to end up with because we don't predetermine anything. But at the very end, we come up with all these options, and we're sitting there with all these options in the paper and the pros and the cons, and everybody's head's full of everything, and then all of a sudden we say, okay, take a break for a night, two, whatever, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start cutting. And then we cut that list of options, and we call it cutting from the bottom. We say, okay, of all those options up there, which ones absolutely will not work? This community won't accept it. Because, by the way, we don't present any options that are not educationally sound, not fiscally affordable, and the last thing, which is what we have to learn, is are they community acceptable? And so then we start cutting from the bottom. So we may start with 20, 15, and we just keep cutting. We keep saying, that's not as good as this one. Is that better than this one? What about that one over there? And I charged this committee to come up with the two best options. Now, over at LaPorte, the committee came up with 3. They had cut all the way up to 3. And then we hit a point where where the committee just said, we can't do any more. Del, we can't do any more. And I said, that's not fair. This school board asked you to help them to learn about what the community will accept. If you can't get down from 3 to 2, how do you expect a school board to ever get to 1? That's not fair. Don't leave them that way. And so after we had some interesting discussion back and forth, and they told me to go mind my own business more than once, they came down to 2. Now, we don't present those options to the board. Your committee will choose spokespeople, and they'll come to the board, and they'll recommend to the board what the committee thinks are the best options. Now, at LaPorte, the board did a brilliant thing. The board said, we need more time. So they took those 2 best options that were presented to them, and they went back out and they started holding meetings at school buildings around the district for the next several months. And they said, your committee, the community committee, brought us a list of these 2 best options. What do you think? And then they started going back and forth just in those 2. Guess what happened? At the very end, when it finally realized they had had enough, and by the way, this is where it gets tough, because they got to make decisions. They're not easy decisions, folks. But that's what they do as the roles of board members. They've agreed to take on this responsibility for children. So they go back, and so what happened at LaPorte? They selected one. The end result is they ended up doing between $88 and $100 million worth of projects. Guess what else? They didn't have a single petition filed against them. You know why? Because they knew, the whole community knew what was going on and why. One of the things that we learn in this process that you'll learn is that as we learn from you, we'll teach back. We'll tell you those issues, like the things about the declining enrollment. If you didn't know that, if you had no knowledge of that, if your committee doesn't know about that, they realize, well, we can just keep going like we're doing. No, you can't. No, you can't keep going like you're going, or you're going to be broke eventually. So that's the process we have. We've developed it over many, many years, used it with a number of school districts. It's been very positive all the way through. But it gets tough at the end to be on that committee, and it's always tough to be a board member, okay? But that's what you selected them to do, and they've accepted that responsibility you gave them, and I commend them again for being here with you. So that's what we have for you. I will tell you again that we're pleased to have the opportunity they've given us. I'm Del, it's Paula. I'm sorry, Todd is new with the company. He's not here. Denise Pontrelli, Dr. Pontrelli is the actual director of the whole group of school IQ facilities. And then Hazel Reinhardt, of course, is the demographer. And Hazel's working with another school district right at this moment, so she couldn't be here. But at this point, I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for giving us the opportunity to address you. And if there are questions that you have, I forgot to tell you one thing. We don't operate this whole process without the board. I want you to know that. What we ask the board to do is to put 2 board members or 3 on that key committee. Okay? We don't want 4. If you have 4 with a 7-member board, you have a quorum, and that's absolutely an actual board meeting. And we don't want them to have to call a board meeting every time we meet. So we ask for 2 or 3 board members. They select them themselves, okay? And then we tell the board members, we're going to ask you to do something that's tough to do. Keep your mouth quiet. You're there to help the committee understand what's going on in the district. When the committee members ask you about the district, then share with them that. But when we get into talking about options, guess what will happen if a school board member goes, oh, I like that option? Guess what the rest of the committee will say? Well, you board members must have already talked about what you want. Well, what are we doing here? So they're there. When we get to that critical element, we ask them to listen. Listen to this committee. Don't tell what you think's best. You'll have your opportunity when it gets to you as a full board. So I wanted to share with you, the board knows this. We've talked with them several times about it. They understand that role, and they're very happy to take that role with you. So they're not out in front of you. This board is not out in front of you making their own decisions now. They want this committee input. They want this community input. So thank you to Superintendent Thalheimer. Thank you to members of the board that are here and the ones that aren't. And if there are questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them the best I can. Okay. Thanks, folks. We'll be back with you, and we'll keep you informed.